Superman Returns works a little too hard to emulate the spirit of the Richard Donner film and ultimately comes off as a little dated. While it still has good moments and decent casting, by and large, the film doesn't impress and therefore isn't worthy of consideration in the pantheon of superhero movies. Comment down below, let me know what you think of Superman Returns. I'm your host, Brennan of the New Wave Nerds. Like and subscribe down below for more nerd content and commentary. Now let's roll the intro. In Superman returns to Earth after spending 5 years in space examining his home world, Krypton. But he finds things have changed while he was gone, and he must once again prove himself important to the world. The film is directed and written by Bryan Singer, as well as written by Michael Dougherty and Dan Harris, and stars Brandon Routh, Kevin Spacey, and Kate Bosworth. Now, we're going to begin with a brief, non-spoiler review as always. This movie is much maligned, and to be honest with you, I know that I have seen this movie before. I have to imagine that I had watched it before Man of Steel came out, but I couldn't remember anything from the movie. I remember, of course, the iconic scene of Brandon Routh stopping, I think is it just a plane or is it Air Force One? I don't remember. I think it might just be a plane. I don't know. Stopping a plane. No, that's right. I'm sorry. It is the plane that the shuttle launch is happening off of. Him stopping that in the baseball field. I remember that scene. I remember some bits with Kevin Spacey's Lex Luthor, but I didn't know anything about the plot. I couldn't have told you a single detail about it other than the fact that Superman returns and not many people like him. And that's pretty much, or not that not many people like him, but there's a different view after he's been gone. And that's pretty much the basis of the story. I mean, we have that little extra detail, but apart from that, it's really not that dissimilar from the 1978 movie. And so it is very unmemorable. I don't know if it deserves quite as much criticism as I typically hear it getting. It's by no stretch of the imagination a great movie, but it's decent, it's fun, it's enjoyable. I mean, it definitely, like I said, it is dated, both in the fact that it is a bit of a redux of the original 1978 movie, as well as the fact that some of the CGI and some of the effects don't necessarily hold up as well to this day. But the movie was 20 years ago, right? So we're not expecting anything too amazing. Yeah, I don't know. It's all right. It's a decent movie. It's definitely better than I expected it to be based off of the things that I have heard. And again, it is very, very much maligned. Now, before we get into the spoiler section here, I'm going to very politely ask you all to head on over to patreon.com/newwavenerds. If you like the work that we do here and want to help us make these videos even better, then head on over there. We've got plenty of different tiers with different benefits, so we exchange value for value. And we're doing a patron drive where if we get 15 new patrons or hit $50 a month, which just about covers our podcast hosting fees, then we will release a special 12-part episode, it's rather 12-part series, where we look over DC's classic Crisis on Infinite Earths. We're going to go issue by issue, taking a look at the story, reviewing it as we go along. It's a perfect place to go if you're interested in what's happening, or rather what has happened, but don't really want to read a super wordy comic from 1980. So again, if you enjoy the stuff that we do here and want to help the quality of these videos increase, then head on over to patreon.com/newwavenerds. Now let's get into the spoiler section. The first thing that I want to talk about here is the casting. I think it's partially good and partially bad. I mean, I think there are some decent decisions that are made here. I think Brandon Routh is a fairly good Superman. I mean, it is difficult to live up to the legacy of Christopher Reeve, especially when you are essentially doing the same version of the character. They are very similar, and Brandon Routh doesn't necessarily exceed Christopher Reeve, and so I think because of that, a lot of people, sometimes myself included, have this more negative view of his portrayal. But I think Brandon Routh as an actor does a fairly good job. I just don't think the writing for the part of Superman in this movie is necessarily as good. he comes off across, in some cases, he comes off across a little inept, maybe is the proper term to say here, but certainly he comes off as creepy in this movie. Superman is not supposed to be creepy. He's supposed to be a very, wholesome, kind-hearted gentleman. And in this, he like sort of stalks Lois a little bit. He's like following her a few times, and it's weird. And it's not in like, there's a section in Superman 78 where, it's when they're having their first interview on the balcony of Lois Lane's apartment or whatever. And Lois asks like, what color is my underwear? And he goes, it's pink. They got this whole thing where, it reveals that he can't see through lead. But he goes, it's pink. And that scene taken out of context is creepy in and of itself. But it works because of like the interplay between these two characters. It works because it's flirty, right? She asks him and he responds sort of abashedly, right? And it works because of the interaction between the two of them. But in this, there is no interaction. It's just Superman floating outside her house, peeping through the walls and seeing what's going on with the family. It is just creepy and just plain weird, right? And I don't know. I think the writing was not there. You're trying to give him like a sort of, not quite, but a version of like a hero's journey here where he has to go through an emotional arc and, he has to prove himself to the world that he is, worthy of being here. He has to try and drum up this relationship with Lois, even though she has at least partially moved on. It's a whole thing, and I just don't think it's executed very well. I don't know. But like I said, I do think Brandon Routh himself is fairly good in the role, and I know that he returned in the Arrowverse as Ray Palmer, but also as Superman in either, it was one of their crossovers. I don't know if it was the Elseworlds or the Crisis on Infinite Earths. That happened after I stopped watching the shows, so I'm not 100% sure. But I know that he reappears, and a lot of people really, really like him in that. And maybe part of that is nostalgia. But like I said here, I think Brandon Routh is good. It's just the writing that suffers. As for the rest of the cast, Kate Bosworth is fine as Lois Lane. Lois is definitely much more capable in this movie than she is in the Christopher Reeve films, which is, just by nature of the fact that it's more modern. And so because of that, it is a little bit more in keeping with the post-John Byrne, post-John Byrne, 1986 Man of Steel, right? We've got a much more well-rounded Lois in the comics, and so we ported that over to the film, and I do think it works. But I don't like the subplot with Lois and her family. I don't like the subplot with the child, especially. But it's weird, and I don't think it's written very well, again, because to me, Lois's relationship with her now husband, it felt like she had done it out of spite. Like, to me, it sort of felt like she got married to him out of spite because Superman left her without even saying goodbye, right? And I don't feel like that's something that Lois would do. I think it would have been much more interesting if you had done it in a way where it's like, no, I do love this guy, actually. But I don't think it really comes across that well in the movie. Like I said, I think it just comes out as spite. And Lois, her emotional story beat in this, her confrontation with Superman, I do think it works narratively, but also I don't think it's executed well here. Like a lot of the other stuff in this movie, I think it theoretically works well and it's a good idea, but the actual execution of it means that it fails. In their interactions in the movie, and maybe this is just me, but because of a little bit of the writing, and maybe it's the way that Kate Bosworth is playing it, it makes Lois Lane seem almost petty, right, to a certain degree. Now, like I said, I do like the idea. I can obviously understand where Lois is coming from. The idea that she feels abandoned by Superman, like she tells Clark, the man who she thought was the one for her, to just have him leave would obviously cause some distress, to put it lightly. And so I understand that, and I like it as an idea, but I just don't know if it's necessarily executed here. But I am glad that we got to see Lois be more capable. I'm glad that she actually plays a role in the story more than just the damsel here, because that's what Lois is in the comics, right? She's not lesser than Superman. They are two equals. And I do wish that we could really just see like a full Superman movie. And this is something that we're going to be seeing in a month or so here. But I've always really wanted to see a Superman movie where Clark and Lois are together. You know, Lois knows that Clark is Superman, and we actually get to see them like play off of each other in the way that they force each other to be better, in the way that they bring out the best in each other. That's something that I really want to see. And we're obviously going to see a part of that in the upcoming Superman movie. But there's obviously, you know, just based off of the trailer, it seems like there's going to be some contention there with Lois trying to simultaneously act as the reporter and also the girlfriend, I guess, because I would imagine that they're not married at this point, though that much I'm not 100% sure on. But, you know, it's clear there's going to be tension there. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited to see these two interact when they know each other's secrets, right? I think that's going to be really, really fun. Now, the last member of the cast that I do want to talk about here is Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. I mean, this is the choice that I think is this is the best casting choice in the movie, I think. Brandon Routh is pretty good as Superman, but he's not amazing. Kate Bosworth is pretty good as Lois Lane, but she's not amazing. Kevin Spacey is actually pretty great as Lex Luthor, and I was going to make a joke, and I'll just let you all infer what joke I was going to make about Kevin Spacey playing a good Lex Luthor. I'm just going to leave that there and let you all come to your own conclusions. But he is good. He's menacing. He's much more menacing than Gene Hackman, but there are lots of scenes, especially like towards the end when he's actually has direct interactions where Superman, where you really see like some Gene Hackman pulling through. I like that a lot. There's much less comedy that happens in Lex Luthor's base or whatever, because there's no Otis. But there is still some, like I said, some of the trappings of Gene Hackman, but he puts his own spin on it. And like I said, it comes off as much more menacing, and it's much closer to the version of Lex that I enjoy. Now, Luthor's actual like plan throughout this movie and his function in the plot, I don't necessarily like, which leads into like my main criticism of the movie here, which I outlined in I think the intro and the no spoiler review, is that this movie, Superman Returns, is essentially just a redux of Superman the movie. I mean, it is basically the same thing. Superman comes to Metropolis. Maybe people are confused or hesitant or whatever. He doesn't have the admiration of the city at first, but throughout the second act of the film, he's doing little bits and helping people, and we get a montage of him, doing Superman things. Real quick, I mean, this is where we get the scene of him holding the car above his head in the homage to Action Comics #1, which is so cool, which I think is the thumbnail for this video. But there's that, and then the Lex Luthor stuff really begins in like the second part of Act 2, and he is basically doing this scheme to try and get more land, and that's it. It's the exact same thing. They do put a slightly more interesting spin on it, because obviously in Superman the movie, he is trying to detonate a missile on the San Andreas fault line, which is going to cause part of California to fall into the ocean, so that the cheap property that's closer to the middle of the state or whatever becomes more valuable, la-di-da-di-da. And in this, it's not that he is shaving off a part of the country to make his land more valuable. He is creating more land. And I do think that, if you're going to do the same story, it's an interesting spin on it. And I like that he uses the quote, where he's, the one thing people will always need is land, and they're not making any more of it. It's a very Lex Luthor thing to do, in my opinion, to hear that and be like, okay, well, watch me, But again, it is just the exact same plot, just sort of, with more special effects and a little bit more grand because it's almost 30 years later. It's what 28 years? Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It's that math was correct. It's uninteresting to me. I think I get that it's Superman Returns. You're bringing him back after he's been gone for, man, I don't know when Superman 4 came out. What is that one called? The Quest for Peace. That one came out in 1987. So yeah, we're looking at, it's been 20 years, 19 years since The Quest for Peace came out. And so you're reintroducing the character, and it makes sense to sort of go back to form and try and redo the thing that made everybody love the movie in the first place. But when you have a narrative that is literally the exact same, I think people are going to tune out, It's very, very weird to me. So yeah, like I said, there's some good things with Luthor. There's some bad things with Luthor. But like I said, by and large, he is probably the best casting choice here. There was another cast member that I did want to discuss who I didn't enjoy really at all. I'm sure he's a very lovely gentleman, and he's probably done some good work. But yeah, the writing is not here for him. That is Sam Huntington as Jimmy Olsen. Not impressed. I hate the characterization of Jimmy here. I hate the fact that it's constantly like, Jimmy's sort of a screw up and something like this. And to me, maybe I'm wrong, but to me, that's not Jimmy. To me, Jimmy is the only person who could take a clear picture of Superman. That's what Jimmy is to me. He's a bit of a screw up. He's a young kid who's having fun, but he is the only person in the world to get a clear picture of Superman. And so if nothing else, he is competent in the thing that he is supposed to do, and that is photography, right? And this, definitely doesn't have that. He gets a moment in the middle of the movie where he takes a good picture, but in the beginning, he's supposed to take a picture of Superman's return, and it's just like a random red dot that's all the way, in the sky. You can't see. And we've got the fun thing where it's like, it's a bird, it's a plane, and then Clark walks in the building, or in the room, rather. But yeah, no, I don't know. I just don't like the characterization of Jimmy here. Now, I get he is, he's the joke character. He's generally the comedic relief. But in this, he just doesn't do anything. This is one of those things where it's like, man, you just included him to include him. Superman the movie sort of does the same thing with Jimmy, but the first one obviously gets a pass because it's the first one. Whereas in this, everybody knows Superman, everybody knows Lex, everybody knows, Lois. Give Jimmy a little bit something to do. Maybe Jimmy is the guy who gets the picture that gets people back on board with Superman being back in town. But I don't know. I do have a bit of an affinity for Jimmy. There is another thing that I just remembered. There's a lot of fun moments in this movie, and it is sort of the embodiment of like my main criticism in that it's a Superman the movie redux, but at the same time, it's also just like very fun. There are lots of lines in this movie that are just directly pulled from that. When Superman first saves the plane, he goes in and he's like, I hope this didn't turn any of you off of flying. Statistically speaking, it's still the safest way to travel. All this jazz. There are lots of little jokes and homages that are in here that they're really fun. And I think they're fun as like a fan service thing, but I do also think that that's part of the reason that like this movie isn't necessarily as good as it could be, because this feels like nostalgia bait before it was so prominent in like superhero movies and stuff. Again, it's just a redo of the same story. You know, we'll just put some old lines in there. We'll have some fun homages, and it's Superman, so people will come to see it and shell out, you know, $10 a movie ticket or however much they costed in 2006. I would imagine it was less, but I wasn't buying tickets back then, so I don't really know. But I think we're going to start to close things out here. So yeah, finally, I'm going to say like this movie, it is better than I think a lot of people give it credit for. I mean, it's a fine enough movie. It is, you know, a classic early superhero movie. There's nothing really status quo shifting. There's nothing really incredibly amazing in it, but it's a fun movie. It is definitely a little long. It comes in at 2.5 hours. It feels a little bloated, but it's a good time. Just pop it on in the background. It's fun to have, and obviously we've got the same score from the original Superman movie in some points, and so that's always fun to hear. You know me. If you listen to the last Superman movie video, you know how I feel about that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you're looking for like an actual like good superhero movie to watch, then I wouldn't recommend this at all. But if you're just looking for someone to put on the background, it's a good choice for sure. But that's where we're going to call it. So again, make sure to comment down below. Let me know what you thought about this movie. Make sure that you subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, which, let's see, we're going to be back here Thursday to talk about the first volume in the current ongoing Superman series, which is titled Supercorp, which is really fun. It's beautiful art by Jamal Campbell. I really love that. I didn't notice it the first time I read it because I didn't know what his name was. But then after going back and rereading it after reading Zatanna, I'm like, oh, now I understand why I enjoyed this comic in the first place. And then we're going to be back here Tuesday talking about Man of Steel, the 2013 reintroduction of Superman with Henry Cavill. Much maligned as well, but for different reasons, for very different reasons than Superman Returns. But I'm excited to talk about all that. I'm super excited for the upcoming Superman movie. So stick around because the summer of Superman is in full momentum. I don't know what I was trying to say there. It's going, baby. I don't know. I'm floundering here. The summer of Superman is here, and I am excited for it. And you know what? I will see you guys on Thursday.